Yeah, welcome everyone. Welcome to the first Saturday session of 2024. I'll get Susie back in a minute, but we're delighted, absolutely delighted to have as our first Saturday session guest, Mr. Joe Filisko. He's going to give you a workshop on foundations and fundamentals, I believe. And if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll try and get to them as we go along, or maybe answer at the end. So, Joe, over to you.
All right. So, when I started playing harmonica, I was pretty amazed as to how little good information was out there. Tony Glover's instructional book was really the only thing, and it was full of a lot of misinformation. I started working on harmonicas very early on, and it enabled me to have relationships with many of the best living players in the world. And one of the things that I always asked them was, who should I be listening to? Who are the players that you think are the best? The idea being that if you can study the best players that ever lived and ever recorded, why not? Why learn from a mediocre player when you can learn from the best? So it got me really listening carefully to the players like D. Ford Bailey and Sonny Terry and Sonny Boy Williamson 1 and 2 and Little Walter and Big Walter, to name a few. These are the players that I felt like were the best players that had ever lived and had ever recorded. And I think some of what I'm going to talk about here is going to be revealing as to why. So when you listen to a player like Little Walter, who I think was the greatest blues harmonica player that ever lived, he was the most innovative and did the most unique stuff at the time. When you listen to Little Walter, what you get this sense of is that he's this mighty, tall skyscraper going up into the clouds. And you marvel at how the enormity of his musical height. But what you don't immediately appreciate is the enormity of his depth, how deep. Any building or tree that is high and tall has to have an equal foundation or root system going down to support it. And that is going to be the real core of what I'm going to be talking about today, the foundations of these great players and things that I think if you're aware of, it will make your journey as a player a lot easier, and you'll at least know what to be working on. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the chat. If folks have questions, they want to shoot them in the chat. It may be a lot easier than unmuting. If the question isn't relevant to what I'm speaking about at the moment, then we can come back to it later. I definitely want to keep the forward momentum going on and not be sidetracked. So, foundations is down deep. If you are a young player that's been playing for a year or less, or maybe a little bit more, trying to play Little Walter's juke is probably a really bad idea, because Little Walter's juke is the equivalent of going to school and getting a doctor's degree. If you're a young player, then you need to be working on stuff that is first, second grade level kind of stuff. That is what I'm going to be talking about when I get to the fundamentals. But the foundational stuff that I'm going to talk about starts with posture and holding. And actually, the irony is that if you look at a lot of these great players, you'll probably notice that many of them were kind of rule breakers. They didn't necessarily play with the best posture or play with what I consider to be the best way, the better ways to hold the harmonica. Let's start with actually holding the harmonica. If I mute my or stop my video, you'll see a picture of my hand, and I'm going to start here. This is the conventional way that most people hold the harmonica, with the index finger laying flat across the top of the harmonica. This is not a bad way to hold it, but I don't feel like this is the best way to hold it. I have some better information, better ways to hold it. And if I mute my video, shazam. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually bending my index finger in trying to put the harmonica more in the first knuckle of my index finger. That brings your hand a little bit farther back. And it also enables you to hold the harmonica a little higher. You get about an inch or so more of a vertical lift on the harmonica, which means it's a little bit easier to get to your mouth. So this is the way that I recommend holding the harmonica. Notice the way that my fingers are sort of cone shaped. They are all together. I have a big gaping hole underneath the harmonica, which is not a problem because when you end up playing, it comes to your face. In this part, that hole is all filled up. So holding the harmonica. Here are some of the problems associated with this way of holding it, the way that most books teach. When you hold the harmonica this way, it tends to make you want to cock your head this way to the side. Do I have to tell you that this is a problem if you're learning to play and your head is cocked to the side? If that is you, I would encourage you to try to straighten the head out. Of course, you can lift your arm up higher and that'll help you straighten your head out, but try to avoid playing with your head cocked to the side. The other thing too is most people, when they play and they hold the harmonica, they want to rest this part of their arms against their torso, and the harmonica falls quite a bit short of the mouth when you hold it this way. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm fading there on you, which is no good. So what players do is they slouch or they raise their shoulders up. And this is what you want to avoid. You don't want to be slouching or raising your shoulders. So I'm a very big advocate of one-handed harmonica practicing. It enables you to get your shoulders down in a more relaxed position. It enables you to keep your head back. This is really the same posture that you would take on if you were studying voice. If you were singing, you would be upright, somewhat erect, keeping your head not back or not leaning forward, but straight ahead. And if you hold the harmonica with one hand, it's much easier to keep your shoulders down. So check yourself in front of a mirror, and please make sure that you're not resuming some uncomfortable looking position. I know that there's a lot of video of professional players and they got their head really slumped way forward when they're playing. And this is not good. This is not good for breathing. I appeal to your common sense with this sort of thing. Posture and harmonica holding. Some thoughts there for you that really took me quite a few years to figure out. So the first of the foundations is get comfortable as much as you possibly can, and hold the harmonica in a way that's comfortable. You do not need to cover up the entire back of the harmonica when you're playing. That is a misconception, in my opinion. Don't cover up the entire back of the harmonica. The second of the foundations is what I call embouchure development. Embouchure development. And that's essentially how you put your mouth, how you play the harmonica with your mouth on the instrument. It is my opinion that the players that I previously named are predominantly 95% of the time tongue blocking style players, maybe a little bit less for Sonny Terry. He was a little bit more of an enigma than most of those other players that I named. But tongue blocking, I'm a very big advocate of tongue blocking, which is essentially relaxing your mouth, putting the harmonica, sticking your tongue out, and then generally your tongue may be in the middle with hole here and here, or your tongue may be to one side or the other. So if you can drop your jaw and stick your tongue out, then you already have the skills needed to tongue block. And if you can stick your tongue out and move it to the right and left without moving your jaw, and sticking it out and pulling it off, now you're already doing some advanced tongue blocking stuff. The real confusion for people lies in really bending. Believe me when I say that you can do all the conventional bending that you hear in blues playing harmonica. You can do all that bending with the tongue blocking. It may seem a little bit more awkward. You may need to take a little bit more time to develop it and make it happen, but it's worthwhile. If you're going back and forth and bending with the puckering embouchure, then that really, to me, is similar to playing the piano with one finger, with your fingers curled in a fist in playing with one finger. If you are only using puckering when you're playing the harmonica, then definitely that's like playing the harmonica or playing the piano, with one finger. It doesn't make it wrong. It just means that you don't have as much access to all the other sounds, the 4 other sounds that the harmonica makes as easily is when you're doing the tongue blocking embouchure. I'm going to play a little bit from the kind of Sonny Boy Bye Bye Bird thing, Bye Bye Bird piece that he does, and I'm going to play it, and I'm going to only move my tongue. So you could see that I hardly moved my lips or jaw at all when I was doing that. It was the tongue driving all of that. So I would just encourage you to not be dismissive of the power of the tongue blocking embouchure. The great players that I had mentioned, I believe that their default embouchure is the tongue blocking embouchure. Certainly you can switch back and forth, but if you like a lot of sound, the big sound, a lot of sound and tone out of the harmonica, check out what is available with the tongue blocking. That is the second foundation, embouchure development. Take the time to explore that. And this is something that I have been asking since the first couple years that I have been a player, is how do these guys do this? What is the importance of tongue blocking when you play? Well, embouchure development. The third foundation is what I call bidirectional breathing awareness. Bidirectional breathing awareness. Well, that basically means that when you play the harmonica, you can make sounds inhaling and exhaling. And you would think that that gives you an advantage and that makes things easier, but a lot of times it makes things more confusing. And it makes things more confusing mainly, in my opinion, because the sounds that most people love when they hear the blues harmonica, those sounds are predominantly all inhaling sounds. Now, when you sing or when you play a horn or you play a flute, your breathing direction is unilateral or unidirectional. You take a big inhale breath and then you let it out in a slow and controlled manner. Well, when you play blues on the harmonica, one of the things that you have to develop is doing the opposite of that, dumping the air as fast as possible and letting it in a controlled and relaxed manner. So ultimately, you have to be aware, or you want to become aware of where you're at in your range of breathing. So bidirectional breathing awareness is the third foundation. I really learned so much about how to breathe through the harmonica properly by listening to these great players, especially by listening to Little Walter and listening to Sonny Terry. Their breathing is really phenomenal. Somebody is unmuted, so kindly check and make sure you're not unmuted and making unnecessary noise, please. Thank you. Bidirectional breathing awareness. I've heard people say that if you want to learn to breathe correctly, study how to breathe with a voice teacher. I got to say, I disagree with that. I strongly find that to be very, very short of clarity and vision as it pertains to breathing, playing the harmonica, because the blues sounds are so much inhaling driven when you play the harmonica. It doesn't do you a lot of good to learn to breathe only in an exhaling manner when you sing. The breathing is very different. As a matter of fact, a lot of people that are accomplished singers and try to pick up the harmonica later are very challenged with the new way of breathing, which is often the complete opposite of good breathing playing, good breathing singing. That's the third, bidirectional breathing awareness. And the fourth foundation, again, when I say foundation, I'm talking about the roots, good playing, the roots of playing. The last is appropriate repertoire. I'd made a little comment about if you are a young player starting out, you've been playing less than 2 years. If you're trying to play juke, I would throw up a red flag and say that you are way out of your depth. You probably do not have the fundamentals happening. You probably do not have the skill set happening to do justice to such a piece. If you were giving advice to a young child that's 5 years old, you want this young child to be successful. You wouldn't say to them, you need to have a degree. You need to have a college degree, a doctor's degree, a master's degree if you want to be something in life. So start studying it now. It's completely insane. You have to work on what is appropriate to your skill set. You don't work on something now that's going to take you 15 years to master. You want to work on something now that may take you a week or two to develop some control and precision with. So coming up with repertoire, coming up with material to practice based upon what your skill set is what I think of as the appropriate repertoire part of having a good foundation. So once again, the 4 foundations of good playing are harmonica holding and posture. Make sure you look relaxed when you're playing. Don't look contorted and uncomfortable with your head turned to the side. Embouchure development, how you put the harmonica in your mouth. Personally, I'm a big advocate of tongue blocking. I think people are very dismissive of it and don't understand the importance of tongue blocking for traditional styles, big sound and tone. If you're only puckering, that's the equivalent of playing the piano with one finger and the rest of your fingers curled into a fist. The third foundation is bidirectional breathing awareness. You have to learn to breathe differently if you're playing the harmonica. It's not like singing. It's not like playing a horn. It's different. And the final is appropriate repertoire. Work on material that you can play well after a short or a reasonable amount of time. It's very frustrating for me as an instructor listening to somebody play something advanced badly than something simple pretty darn well. I will take simple well any day. Jos mentions Whammer Jammer. Yes, Whammer Jammer is a very advanced doctor's degree Chicago blues style harmonica instrumental. It is very advanced. If you've only been playing for a few years, you're probably out of your depth. That covers the 4 foundations, in my opinion, of what really good, accomplished harmonica playing is. All styles, actually. That be blues or country or old-timey or Cajun. It really is the same. Maybe not so much for super contemporary styles like jazz. Maybe that would be a little different, but I'm not really a jazz player. I can't really speak in behalf of that. Are there any questions about my four foundations of harmonica playing? I do not see any questions. Good. That means I explained myself pretty well. So moving right along to the 5 fundamentals. Screen share here briefly. Actually, I can take this link and I can copy it and I can put it in the chat so you can download it. Briefly, the fundamentals of the harmonica, in my opinion, are chords, because they're the easiest thing to play on the harmonica. I would be surprised if anybody would argue that. Chords are the easiest thing to play. Second thing is active blues breathing, which is really learning how to breathe differently that is appropriate to the blues or to the style that you're trying to play. The third fundamental is chords and tongue blocking, which I really need to demonstrate. The fourth fundamental is notes and tongue blocking, which I will demonstrate. And the final fundamental is what I refer to as riffs, licks, hooks, simple songs. Riffs, licks, hooks, songs. Things that, as a harmonica player, that you probably ought to know. If you raise your hand when somebody asks, who is a serious blues harmonica player, and you can't do a boogie riff or a rumba riff or a ham bone groove or the I'm a man riff, you can't do those, that should be an indication that you're missing something. It's kind of like being like a cook and not being sure how to boil water. They're really important things. So, on to the chords. If you look at what I had put up there, let's see, I'm going to shrink my screen. Chords, easiest to play. I've been using a C harmonica here. When I say a chord, I basically mean holes 1, 2, and 3, or 1, 2, 3, and 4. When you go back and you listen to the Sonnies or the Walters or D Ford, when they're playing chords, they're basically playing on the bottom end of the harmonica. Chords are not in the middle range of the harmonica. Occasionally they can be exhaling, but they're not all over the harmonica. They're down on the bottom end of the harmonica. That's where the magic happens playing chords. Chords will give you the biggest sound that the harmonica makes. Big, warm, chordal sound there. When you play chords, this is where you are playing using a puckering embouchure. You don't want your tongue to touch the harmonica when you're playing a chord. It's take your tongue off, wide open mouth. There's your harmonica playing chord. Actually, the word harmonica comes from the word harmony, which means chord, essentially. You know, it really comes from that. So it was meant to, in part, be a chordal instrument. Here's a really good way of thinking of the chords on the harmonica. If you're thinking of the C chord on the harmonica, then that means when you inhale, you get a G chord, and that's your 5 chord. 1 chord exhaling, 5 chord inhaling. So songs like so there's 2 songs there that are just 1 chord and 5 chord. But if you make the 5 chord your root chord, your 1 chord, your inhaling chord is your 1 chord, your G chord, now all of a sudden when you exhale, you have a 4 chord. So that is really the simplest way to look at what the chords are on the harmonica. It's either 1 chord and 5 chord if you're exhaling, and it's a 1 chord and 4 chord if you're inhaling. Blues is pretty much, 90% of blues songs are 1 chord and 4 chord. So you have 2 of the main chords there when you're playing blues. The other things, the harmonica train imitation, I find this to be the #1 most valuable exercise that there ever has been for developing skill and coordination, sound, tone, rhythm, breath control when you're playing the harmonica. I start off everybody with the harmonica train imitation, and the rhythm part of the train imitation is just 2 exhale breaths followed by 2 inhale breaths. And if you can do that rhythmically with breath control, never pausing to breathe, then you're going to be on your way to getting your mojo working. Here's a little demo of that. Matter of fact, I'll start out with an inhaling train whistle. So there's an example of pure rhythm, breath control. Never once did I pause to breathe, pause to grab air, or pause to release air. And that is something that right from day one as a player, if you've never played before, you can do that. Of course, I know you can't do it that fast, but you can do it, and you can pay attention to what is going to go on with developing some skill in coordination. I will talk about the nose push in a little bit. So that's the harmonica train imitation. There are also some things you can do. I want to point out with the train imitation, I'm playing very open-throated. You can hear the resonance in my mouth and throat when I'm doing that. And that's also what you will want to develop when you play the throat tremolo. The throat tremolo is basically just a... You develop it by practicing the train imitation. Open-throated, that's really how you work on getting the biggest sounds possible out of the harmonica. Another thing with the chords that you can do is use articulation, which is really a big thing that pucker players are staunch about, that you can't do tongue blocking, and that is create articulations. But since we're playing chords here, we are puckering. We're puckering with a big, wide embouchure. So when I'm going to say tuck, cut, 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 tuck, 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 tuck. If I do that in the shuffle rhythm, I create what I refer to as the hard shuffle rhythm. This is something you would hear Big Walter do. It's a very valuable skill for playing accompaniment. On holes 1, 2, and 3 of the harmonica, sounds like this. So I went from having big, round, full chords with an open throat to now having very sharp staccato chords by articulating tuck, cut, tuck, cut, tuck, cut, tuck, cut, very much like a drummer would create. So yeah, you are creating percussion sounds on the harmonica now by doing this. Very valuable skill playing accompaniment to other musicians, especially if you're in a trio or you're in a duo. The hard shuffle chording. Other things that you can do with the chords on the harmonica are sort of the big Walter Horton, Sonny Boy, number 2, what I call chord bombs, which is essentially 2 loud chords played on the second beat and then the last eighth note of the second beat triplet. So it goes like this: 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4, 1, 3, 4. Imagine the help me groove. That's something you hear Big Walter. Sometimes he would do that throughout the entire song. A very, very powerful thing. It's really mimicking a horn section when you're giving that chordal blast. I call those chord bombs. Chord bombs, because they're so explosive. Also, some other chordal things you can do are the peg leg Sam chordal groove, which is... Yada, ahu do a yada, ahu do a yada. Listen to Peg Leg Sam play. You hear that little chordal groove in between his vocals. All chord playing. Sonny Terry had a killer 2-bar chordal groove that he did. A lot of variations of it, but essentially it's... all chord playing. I've got a study song called Chasin' Lost Sonny that breaks that down and goes into that. You could even do that Bo Diddley Hambone groove. So those are really a mess of things you can do just with chords that are accessible to young players, because you're not dealing with, like, where does the tongue go? Am I bending? What, these are much more manageable. That's why I like to start with the chordal stuff. Chords. You can also do sustaining, which is something that I should point out, that if you were sitting in with a 12-bar blues band, you could actually quietly sustain the chords like this. Check this out. From the 5, and then I'm going to start sustaining chords. So it was only the 5 chord that I didn't have there in playing. It's really crazy that as a harmonica player, you got 2 of the most common chords, but you don't hear people playing accompanying sustaining. I think that was a pretty good example there. So chords playing, don't be dismissive of the chords. There are actually people that teach harmonica that don't even acknowledge the chords, which I think are crazy. All right, the second fundamental of the harmonica is what I call active blues breathing. And really what that is that's really learning how to breathe backwards more than anything. If you listen to Little Walter and you really want to make sense out of what he's doing, and even Sonny Terry to a large degree, listen for where they exhale, because most of what they play is all inhaling. Take, for example, the opening line of Sad Hours, and how almost all of it is inhaling. just one exhale thing in there, and the rest of it is all inhaling. So you learn to do these powerful, long inhaling things with two tricks. Trick one is what I call the exhale push, which is essentially if you exhale all the air out of your lungs until you can't exhale anymore, you are in your low range of breathing. You are empty. That is what you want to become familiar with. If you can quickly go to that empty spot, you can quickly dump air, you can be more powerful with your blues playing, because the exhaling notes on the harmonica are not your dark, deep, spooky, smoky blues notes. It's the inhaling. The second trick is what I call the nose push, and that is what I did when I was playing the Sad Hours thing. Sometimes you pick one exhaling thing, one exhaling note or split, but you use it as a facade to quickly dump air out of your nose, like an accordion player would with their thumb air hole, So something like, so I had a very, very short exhale there on the 3-hole exhale, but I used it really to dump air, to disguise where I'm releasing air. And that's what the nose push is. These are two valuable skills that people really don't talk about, but if you listen to the great players, the Sonnies and the Walters, if you listen to where they exhale, you can hear this stuff. I think the best of the guys was Little Walter. Some of his playing is so phenomenally inhaling driven. And you can't do that unless you really, really rethink how you breathe when you play the harmonica. The next fundamental is what I call chords and tongue blocking, which is kind of an interesting concept, but it is a way for me to explain the phenomenon of the full tongue block, which is basically sticking your tongue out and completely covering all of the area inside your lips, just this. If I do this and I lift my tongue very quickly, I can get a very quick chord. As a matter of fact, if I want to do this for Dave's sake too, if I play hole 3, for example, inhaling, and I lift my tongue quickly and I replace it, you hear that faint little chord in there. Now if I tongue block everything, you hear the chord faintly. So what players did, especially Sonny Boy number 2, is he would use this like the hard shuffle chording, but he would go from a full tongue block. And that is how he would able to get things like this. He had a very unique play style. The only people that did this were the ones that were inspired by him. So you get this idea of this rhythmic chording from the full tongue block. And that's where you get this super special vamping, slapping sound. Super explosive, super powerful. And working on this rhythmic chording will also help you develop more coordination with your tongue blocking. When you listen to a player like D. Ford Bailey, you may not hear this, but you hear a lot of this you hear that kind of thing going on, and in that the chords and the tongue blocking, practicing that help you develop that kind of coordination for more of an accompaniment style of tongue blocking. And the fourth fundamental is what I call notes in tongue blocking. I'm going to go back to the screen share here again, notes in tongue blocking. And I've heard a lot of discussion, and it seems to be fairly accepted nowadays that when you want to play clean single notes, you go to puckering, and then when you want to play anything else, you switch to tongue blocking. Why would you want to switch to going back to puckering when you can get the clean single note tongue blocking? One of the things, well, I had pointed out earlier, there's a lot of confusion that you can't bend properly with the tongue blocking. I assure you that is only said by people that can't do it. It's a bunch of baloney. All those great players that I named definitely could bend with tremendous skill using the tongue blocking. So you just got to spend the time to do it. A really good way of thinking of how to tongue block is start with the split, octave split, and just learn to take and play one note or the other or both without moving your lips or jaw. You can develop that by making slight adjustments to the shape and size of your tongue. It's very, very, very doable. Don't underestimate the amazing things the tongue can do. It's a band of muscles that you can retrain and teach new skills to. And with the tongue blocking, of course, you got the different octaves and splits that you can do. You want those octaves in different splits for Cajun music, and you get that crunching sound. Which is a really big part of the more aggressive, big sound Chicago blues. You really want that. And when you're doing that, you can also add in the chord in between that gives you a little bit of a rhythmic push. For other styles like old-timey, the chord is played more aggressively, more round, like but you don't tend to hear chords like that in Chicago blues. You don't tend to. So notes in tongue blocking, when you get the ability to go from a clean single note to a chord to a split octave to another clean single note, that's the equivalent of playing the piano with your fingers over the piano keys and being able to play one note here or one note here or an octave or a chord with three fingers down. It's very much the equivalent of that, but you just have to develop the skill in coordination And I assure you that the vast majority of the time, when you listen to the great players like the Walters or the Sonnies, that's what you're hearing. You're hearing that degree of tongue blocking when you're hearing them play. And the last of the fundamentals, which basically are things that these are all things that you should be working on as a young player, are the riffs, licks, hooks, and songs. You know, so if you are a blues harmonica player and you can't play this, you know, if you can't do that boogie thing, that should be a red flag for you there. That's something you have to know if you're a blues harmonica player. A rumba riff. No bending in a lot of these riffs. Even a box shuffle. That's something you hear guitar players do a lot of. The I'm a Man riff. You can actually do it on chords by playing. Don't tell me as a beginner you can't do that. Much more advanced version. So those are things. Hoochie Coochie Man riff, which is generally a straight harp riff. You should know how to get that, approximately at least. So there you go. The 4 foundations and the 5 fundamentals, really the basics, sort of the underlying things in playing. If you can't play chords rhythmically, you sure as hell are not going to be able to play notes rhythmically, because playing notes or splits involves additional technique. Chords requires the least amount of technique. That's why I'm going back to this kind of fundamental basic stuff. So that's what I got. What do you think?
Oh, Joe, that was fantastic. There's a couple of questions in the chat. One member's asked, what would you do over the 5 chord regarding the chords when you were playing chords over the progression? And if you haven't readily got the 5 chord there, what would you do?
I would switch to a D harmonica. As a harmonica player, if you use more than one harmonica, you automatically get bonus points with any and all members of the audience, unless they happen to be harmonica playing snobs. You always get bonus points when you use more than one harmonica.
Brilliant. And there was another question by Joss, and he was saying, what's the boogaloo?
Yeah, a boogaloo is like a tramp groove, with the emphasis different. So a tramp groove is generally the is where 1 is, and the boogaloo is more where the chord comes in on the second beat. So it'd be like very similar to the tramp, just moved over a beat.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Oh, there you go. There's Mark's just put in the chat. Can you give any basic tips to a tongue blocker who wants to start bending using the tongue blocking technique?
It's the same exact thing that you do when you're bending, when you're puckering. You're creating a constriction spot in your mouth, but you just have to do it with your tongue also blocking. So if I was to bend hole 2, I'm creating that kind of constriction spot in my mouth. But if I move my tongue, as long as I have that same sort of sound, that constriction spot, the note will bend. Doesn't matter where your tongue is when you're doing it. So you just have to spend a little bit more time with it. Really the key, and I've always found this to be the case, that the people that are trying to learn bending with tongue blocking are the same people that really haven't learned to tongue block with any kind of coordination yet. You got to get the tongue blocking happening on the unbent notes before you try to get the bending happening. And tongue blocking is a little bit like mystery seeds, which I mean is that you can plant certain seeds in the ground and water them, and in a few days they're sprouting. And other seeds, they just take many weeks or months before something happens, and you just got to be patient with it. Don't develop bad habits when you're trying to bend. Don't bend with your shoulders. Don't bend with your face. Don't bend by making weird contortions with your jaw. All the bending can happen anywhere on the harmonica with no force. And that's anywhere on the harmonica. You can bend all those notes without force if you know where the resonance is and how the resonance works. Another really big mistake people make is they get a little bit of skill bending on holes 1 through 5, maybe 1 through 6, and then they try to bend holes 9 and 10. No. You got to take your time. You got to learn to go from the regular harmonica on holes 1 through 6, and then go to a higher key harmonica on 1 through 6. The key to bending the blow notes is being able to bend the high inhaling notes, and that gives you a bridge over into bending the exhaling notes. If you try to just go right to the highest notes, very bad idea. That's just sort of like, that's the equivalent of struggling with a 5th grade exam, and you're not quite getting a 5th grade exam, so you immediately go to high school. You immediately go to 10th grade and you think that's going to help you. No, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way.
That's a great example, Joe. I think we've got time for 3 more questions, if it's okay with you.
Yes.
Then, so Simon's asked, when you are bending a bent note tongue blocking, would you play a slap at the same time?
Generally not. That complicates things, but I mean, there is a certain degree that you can do on it. But it doesn't quite have the same slapping sound. It's more of like a chord that happens when you do it. But there is some that you can get away with there on that. But it's pretty difficult.
Yeah, don't make it difficult for yourself, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And Darren's asked, he says, you said, it's better to play something that's simple and play it well. Have you got any suggestions of what he may start with?
I'm a big advocate of learning 2-chord songs. And I played some at the beginning, but like, here's another one. Songs that you can play in 2 different octaves. I'm playing a chord up higher. So one of the things I hope to do one of these days is put out a list of like harmonica friendly songs, because not all songs are harmonica friendly. The tuning doesn't lend itself to some songs that well. I have a study song, which is the melody in America. We call it Skip to My Lou. I played it earlier. That's an extremely harmonica-friendly melody, works with the tuning on the harmonica. And the study song shows you, 100 different ways you can play that melody with the techniques that the great players left us. How to use chords in that, how to use accompaniment vamping in it, how to use the breath pulse, how to use the tone pulse. So
that's fantastic. I do remember I remember, Oh Susanna, it's a fantastic tune, because you can play it in all 3 octaves, can't you? So it's a good one for really, using the high notes, using the bends, and for using that middle octave as well. So 2 more questions if we can, Joe, and then we're going to ask you to play us out. It's been a fantastic session. CK says, how hard are you playing? Because a lot of people said that you always hear in the forums, oh, I've blown another harp out, I've blown another reed out. I mean, my harmonicas are okay, luckily. But how hard are you actually exhaling?
Well, I try to use the absolute fullest range of playing, fullest range of dynamics when I'm playing. So that means that I will go from playing so softly the reeds almost don't vibrate to being so violently loud that it scares people. And I believe, especially in blues, that's an important part of how to sell blues, how to represent blues. That is what I hear when I hear Big Walter Horton playing. But I assure you that if I'm playing loud and violently, it's because I want to, not because that's the only way. One of the things that you get out of practicing the train imitation is learning to do it at a faster speed. In being able to control with your breath and make it as soft as a whisper, and then of course as loud as you're capable of. So it's control. It's about playing with control. If you're blowing out reeds, that probably means that you're not in control of what you're doing, and you believe that you need to play at a certain volume to get your sound. And that to me is just you're not being in control of what you're doing.
Sure. I mean, I can vouch for how hard, that is a really good exercise, just taking the train beat down and volume up. It does take a little while to get into, but no, it's a very good exercise. Last question, Joe. Thank you so much for sticking with us. Bob says, can you overblow when tongue blocking?
Sure. Most definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So again, it's a case of just practicing the technique, tongue blocked.
Yes, it definitely is.
Great stuff. Thank you so much. I'm sure everyone, we've got lots of thanks in the chat. It's a fantastic session, Joe. Really loved having you here. You've given us some really insightful things to work on. And all that's left is, I wonder if you'd play us out with a little something.
Oh, well, play us out with something. Yes, blues or non-blues?
You can, whatever you would like.
Whatever I would like, huh?
Oh, Joe, thank you. Everybody, Mr. Joe Filisko, you can unmute and show your appreciation.
Thank you,
so
folks.
much, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Top stuff, as usual.
Ben, I know the voice.
Yes, sir. Right here. Lovely.
Right on.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, folks. Thank you. Thank you. Don't forsake those foundations and fundamentals. That'll help you get to the next level in your playing as fast as possible if you work on those, and especially if you work on those with rhythmic accountability, which is another way of saying make the metronome your friend.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Joe.
You're welcome.
It's been a brilliant session. Brilliant. Thank you, Joe.
All right.
It's been a pleasure having you, and we'll have you back again. As Paula said, we need you to come back to give us the next lot of fundamentals and foundations.
All right. And if anybody's got any questions about that stuff, I'm easy to reach. My email is joe@filisko.com. I love to hear from folks. So everybody have a good evening or day if it's daytime for you.
Brilliant, Joe. Thank you so much. And everyone,
Right on.
hope you've enjoyed this session. Our next session will be April, and it will be Sarah Saputri, and she's going to do a workshop on the pentatonic scale and how to use it. So look out for details of that. Be coming at you soon. So thank you, everyone. Great session, and we'll see you on the next one. So everyone.
Right on, folks. All right. Bye.